of my whole academic career happened in Seattle, not in my university. I mean, this was unbelievable. They brought us all from all over the world, mostly from America, but we had people from the Netherlands and other places. So that's where we met in 2009. I also got to meet Dr. Stephen Meyer and some other people that you might be familiar with. And so fast forward a few years, I find out that attorney Casey Luskin is actually going to get a PhD, which is really cool. And he'll share more about that, and you guys can ask questions. But we met in 2009, reconnected about 10 years ago, 10 to 12 years ago. And then I met a good friend of mine, the history teacher you guys might know, but I met him actually at NDSU. I was walking around campus when I moved here for my PhD, and I saw C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, right in the student union, which is very not typical. You don't see C.S. Lewis in the middle of a public university, right? So I thought this is cool. So I introduced myself to him and found out that he also was invited to Seattle. And so we were all together. So the Seattle people, we have a partnership with one another pretty much. Wherever we meet, we know we have a common bond. And that common bond, is that there are scientific cases to be made against evolution. And that's part of what Dr. Luskin will be sharing with you tonight. So we'll give him a chance to share for about 40 minutes, and then I thought we'd just take some questions. If anyone has any pressing questions right away, maybe we can let that break the ice before you go technical on us. But yeah, Dr. Luskin is here from Seattle. He'll be here till tomorrow morning, I believe, somewhere around, and then he'll be flying out to his next destination. So thanks again for coming out to us. I will just open us in prayer and then hand it over to Dr. Luskin. Father, we thank you for this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more about intelligent design and just learn about the world that you've created. I pray, Lord, that you give us more tools to encourage others to think and to think more clearly about science. I thank you for the relationship and the friendship I have with Dr. Luskin, and I just pray that you bless his time here. I pray you bless each and every person that has come out. And Lord, we just pray for a wonderful evening tonight. We thank you and we give you praise. In Jesus' name, amen. So before he starts, is there any pressing question? Is there anyone here who has a pressing question before we hand it to Dr. Luskin for his presentation? Okay, well, Dr. Luskin, it's all you. Let's welcome him, please.
You guys are going easy on me. This is good. All right, no questions. Oh, you got one? Okay, no, I spoke too soon.
So if the people are silent, but the stones cry out, but the stones get sued for what they say.
There you go. I'm the rock doc lawyer. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I defend the rock. Somebody's got to do it. So yeah. No, thank you so much, Mr. Tarfa, future Dr. Tarfa, Amos. I'm not sure what to call you for all your students here, but thanks so much for the nice introduction. Yeah, I've known. Can I say Amos? That's what I've always known you as. So known him for quite a while. He went through our summer seminar at Discovery Institute in 2009. And we've kept in touch over the years, and he's told me a lot about this school, so it's really exciting to be able to speak before you guys. We may have more things to talk about with the school and more collaborations. I don't know, we'll see where that goes. So in any case, I'm here tonight to talk to you all about intelligent design, evolution, and why this topic matters. And even though I come from Seattle, which is a pretty cool, I'm from LA originally, okay? So I grew up in the sun, and somehow when I was about 27 years old, I got tricked into moving to Seattle, where, it was a lot colder. But even though I'm from Seattle, this has to be the coldest presentation I've ever given anywhere. So I'm going to try to, you guys probably, it's probably like super warm. I've heard that this is unseasonably warm weather you're having here in North Dakota. So you're not at all the least bit cold. Is that true? You guys are like loving this, okay? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is cold. So if I get too cold, I'm going to grab my jacket next to Tanner over there and just throw it on. But I think I can do this. So a quick outline of what we're going to talk about. I first want to just talk about what is at stake and why does any of this matter? Why even have this conversation? But then I want to introduce you guys to the concept of intelligent design. Are we recording this, Amos, or what is the? Okay, where is this going? Is this going on
our school website?
On your school website. Okay, as we speak or later?
Or later.
Okay, all right, okay. So I just didn't know what we're talking about here. So how many of you guys have heard of intelligent design before? Okay, so great. It's not brand new to a lot of you. I'm sure that Mr. Tarfa, future Dr. Tarfa, has done a good job of introducing you all to this topic already. But I hope to give you guys just a very, very sort of brief introduction, because I don't know exactly where everybody's coming from. And I know we have a real mix of ages here today. In fact, I want to know, how many of you guys are students at the school here at LifeSTEM Academy? Okay, great. And so what grades are represented? What is the youngest grade that we have represented tonight? What is the youngest grade that we have here?
Probably third.
Third grade, okay. And then what is the highest grade that we have here? What grade are you in?
I'm in junior.
Junior year. Okay, great. So we got quite a range of ages here tonight. Just so you guys know, I'm not a believer in No Child Left Behind. I'm a believer in everybody gets something, okay? So for some of you, this may be, a little bit too advanced, but even for the third graders, my hope is that you're still going to get something out of it tonight. So don't play on your phone too much. You are going to get something, even though hopefully, for the juniors and the high school kids, hopefully you guys will get the vast majority of this. So we're going to talk about what is intelligent design. We're going to talk about what is the evidence for intelligent design. We're going to then look at some of the evidence in some scientific fields, such as biochemistry, physics, and also paleontology. And then finally, we're going to talk about how intelligent design is the solution to a lot of the confusion that's going on in the origins debate today and a lot of the different ideas that are out there. Well, I think that intelligent design really can help bring a lot of clarity to this debate. So, part one, what's at stake? And by the way, are you just recording the audio? Because I don't see a camera. How is this? Oh, I'm on TV right now. I had no idea. Okay, all right, there we go. So, part one, what is at stake in this issue? So, what you believe about origins has a huge impact upon your worldview. Okay, we're going to talk a lot more about intelligent design tonight. But I want to ask you guys, because this is kind of a closed audience, what is a worldview? Who can tell me what is a worldview? A little bit of audience participation here. Yeah.
So what if I view the world based on your beliefs, like religiously?
Yeah, religiously, ideologically, scientifically, politically, all these different things contribute to your worldview, okay? So what you believe about origins has a huge impact upon what your worldview is going to be. And so this is where I think intelligent design makes a big difference, because intelligent design matters because it shows, using the methods of science, using scientific evidence, that an intelligent cause is responsible for many aspects of nature. And we can explain many features of life and the universe by appealing to an intelligent cause. And this challenges people who basically say that all that exists is matter and energy. What do we call those people? If you say that all that exists is matter and energy, what do we call people who believe that? Yeah. Material. Wow, I'm impressed. You went for like the true technical term. Amos, you're doing a great job here, man. You're really teaching. You probably know most of what I'm going to talk about tonight. So yeah, that would be materialist. Somebody, and we're not talking about materialism like, oh, I like fancy cars, I like flashy clothes. That's a form of materialism, but we're talking about the philosophy of materialism. The philosophy of materialism says that all that exists is matter and energy. There is no supernatural realm. There is nothing other than just pure sort of atoms in motion. And so if you believe that there is an intelligent cause that is responsible for life in the universe, then this challenges materialism or atheism and opens people up to the larger implications, basically the idea that there is a God who created them. Now, intelligent design as a science doesn't get into the religious question of who is the designer, what is the identity of the designer, but it opens people up to these larger questions. So, okay, so let's talk about what is intelligent design. So, intelligent design is a scientific theory which says that many aspects of life in the universe are best explained by an intelligent cause rather than an undirected cause like natural selection. So we're saying that we can use scientific evidence to show that an intelligent cause is responsible for many of the information-rich features of the universe. So what intelligent design basically helps us do is it helps us to scientifically discriminate between objects that were caused by intelligence versus those that came about by unguided material mechanisms, okay? And if this doesn't make a lot of sense, but I hope in just a few minutes this is going to make a lot more sense, okay? So one of the major objections that we often get when I go and I speak to people is people will say, this is not science. Intelligent design is not science. And one of the responses I will often give to people is to say, well, actually, science is already using intelligent design. Intelligent design is already a part of many scientific fields. And so I like to give this silly example of this planet of the apes. This is actually a screenshot from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. How many of you guys have seen that movie? Anybody sci-fi junkie? I'm quite a sci-fi junkie. I pretty much will watch any sci-fi, good or bad. I stayed up too late last night watching a terrible sci-fi movie on on Amazon Video. It was terrible, but because I'm a junkie, I watched it. So anyway, this is an old sci-fi movie. In this movie, they go to this planet of the apes, okay? And there's this weird obelisk-type structure that appears. And the question is, how did it get there? Did it arise maybe due to just natural geological processes? Maybe this is just some kind of a geological crystal that grows out of the ground through purely natural processes. Or maybe these apes are building these weird obelisk structures just out of instinct. Or maybe it was put there by an intelligent cause for some kind of a purpose. So what intelligent design can help us do is it can help us to address the question of how did this thing originate? Did it arise through natural causes on the one hand, or did it arise by an intelligent cause on the other hand? And this is what intelligent design can help us do. And as I said, a variety of scientific fields are already using ID reasoning. One good example is archaeology. Archaeologists will be walking around and you find some kind of a rock or an artifact, and you want to ask the question, did this rock come into its shape for a specific purpose? Was it carved into that shape by an intelligent being for a purpose, or is this just a naturally shaped rock? Just out of curiosity, and I don't know, different parts of the country have different sort of artifacts. If you guys go hiking here, do you find arrowheads and things like that? Is that very common? Okay, cool. In eastern Washington, I've been hiking, and a friend of mine actually did find, I wouldn't call it an arrowhead, but it was some kind of a rock that had been carved by a Native American, by a human being for a purpose. And so when an archaeologist says, okay, this rock is not just a naturally shaped rock, it was carved into a shape for a purpose, they are making a design, what we call a design inference. They are detecting design. They're saying this feature, this rock, this artifact is best explained by having been carved into this shape by an intelligent cause. It didn't just come about naturally by unguided natural processes. So whenever an archaeologist says this is the result of a human being making this artifact, they are making a design inference. They are detecting design. Another field that uses ID reasoning is forensic science. Anybody like to watch CSI? So what happens in pretty much like every CSI episode? They find a dead body, and then they try to figure out how did the person die. And the question that's often asked is, did this person die due to natural causes? They just dropped dead of a heart attack, or did this person die due to intelligent causes, aka murder, right? So these are very important questions that actually our legal system has to resolve. And when they do that, they are making a design inference. If they're saying, okay, no, this person actually did not just die of a natural death, they were murdered. They're making a design inference. They're saying that this set of facts, this situation is best explained by the action of an intelligent agent. And again, every single time our legal system actually puts somebody on trial for some kind of a crime and says, okay, we're going to convict this person of this crime, that jury, that court is making a design inference. They're saying, we are saying that the evidence shows that this intelligent person, this being, this intelligent being, is responsible for the set of facts that has been presented to this court. So intelligent design reasoning is vital for our legal system to be able to operate. We make design inferences every single day without even realizing it. I'll give you guys an example. If you are driving your car and you come across a bunch of random paint splattered on the ground, what are you going to do? You're probably just going to ignore it and keep on driving, right? You're going to think, I don't know, some paint can fell off a truck and this is not anything I need to worry about. But then if you're driving and you see on the ground a bunch of letters that say railroad crossing, what are you going to do, hopefully? You're going to stop, right? You're going to stop at that railroad crossing because you, without even thinking about it, without even realizing it, you made a design inference. You said to yourself, okay, there is paint on the ground that matches letters that I recognize. Some intelligent agent put this paint on the ground for a purpose to send a message to me, and now I need to think about what that message is and if I need to respond to that message. But you wouldn't have done any of that if you hadn't made the connection in your mind. And again, you're doing this subconsciously without even thinking about it, that some intelligent agent put that paint on the ground to send you a message, and now you've got to think about, do I need to do something in response? And if you see stop railroad crossing, you need to stop. And if you don't stop, tragic things can happen, right? You don't stop at a railroad crossing, we don't like to think about the consequences. So we make design inferences every day without even thinking about it. So what the intelligent design community is saying is if we can detect design in fields like archaeology or forensic science or in different other scientific fields, can we also detect design in biology, where life is fundamentally based upon a language-based code? Well, where in our experience do language-based codes come from? In all of our experience in our DNA, language-based codes have only one known source, and that's intelligence. We'll get into this more. But intelligent design theorists would say that we can detect design also in biology using a very similar form of reasoning. So another field that uses ID reasoning is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI. How many of you guys have heard of SETI before? Or anybody saw another bad sci-fi reference, the movie Contact? This is a good movie, Contact. Anybody see Contact back in the 90s? Yeah. So in this movie, basically, there's this array of radio telescopes that are scanning the skies for radio signals, trying to determine if some radio signals coming from outer space were actually sent by an extraterrestrial civilization trying to get our attention. And what they're trying to do, and this is actually a real scientific project, it used to be funded by the US government, the SETI project. These radio telescopes are trying to receive signals so the SETI researchers can discriminate between some radio signals that are just sent by natural causes, interstellar phenomena, stars, quasars, pulsars, etc. They're all emitting radiation, and you can receive these signals and you can say, okay, this radio signal is just the result of normal natural phenomena. But they're looking for a special signal that they think was sent by an intelligent cause that isn't a naturally caused signal, and something that actually is maybe trying to get our attention. Now, they have not yet found any radio signals coming from aliens from outer space, okay? I think I know what they'd be saying if they did find any radio signals. But the point here is that they're trying to detect design. They're trying to detect design in radio signals coming from outer space. And this is using ID reasoning. And so again, they haven't detected any aliens yet, but the very fact that they're trying to discriminate between radio signals on the one hand that came from an intelligent agent, and those that on the other hand came from a natural cause, that is using ID reasoning. It's another good example of ID being used in science. Okay, so how do we detect design? Well, intelligent design is based upon finding information which in our experience comes from an intelligent agent. And there's an information theorist named Henry Quasler who said that the creation of new information is habitually associated with conscious activity, okay? So the creation of new information is habitually associated with conscious activity. Why does he say this? Because in our experience, when new information is being generated, it comes from a mind, it comes from an intelligent agent. Another very smart guy who I actually happen to work with, Steve Meyer, says this. He says, our experience-based knowledge of information flow confirms that systems with large amounts of specified complexity, especially codes and languages, invariably originate from an intelligent source, from a mind or a personal agent. So what is he saying here? I know there's a lot of jargon in this quote. What he's saying is that there's certain types of information which in our experience always come from intelligence, and he calls that specified complexity, also called complex and specified information. I know that's a very jargony term. Don't worry, I'm going to unpack this term for you in just a couple of minutes. Hopefully maybe even the third grader over there will understand it, we'll see. But I'm going to unpack this for you guys. But for the moment, let's just focus on, he gives two examples of types of information which in our experience we see always come from intelligence. And those are codes and languages. Whenever we know the origin of a code or the origin of a language, it always traces back to a mind or a personal agent, to an intelligent being. So we can use information that we're seeing around us in the world to detect design. So what is complex and specified information? Well, roughly speaking, something is complex but it's unlikely, okay? So I like to give this example of, let's say you're looking under a microscope. I know Mr. Tarfa, you spent a lot of time looking at bugs under microscopes, right? So let's pretend that you are looking under a microscope, and I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen, but you see this little microorganism, and it's got all these zeros and ones in it, okay? 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, etc., all right? This is a very, very unlikely sequence of zeros and ones. If you were like flipping a coin, and for every heads you put down a 0, and for every tails you put down a 1, the likelihood of getting this exact sequence of zeros and ones is very, very low. So this is what we would call a complex sequence of zeros and ones. Now the question is unlikelihood alone enough to say that something was designed? Is that enough? Well, we would argue actually it's not, because unlikely things happen all the time, and that does not necessarily mean that we're going to detect design. For example, the likelihood that every one of you is sitting in the exact seat you're in right now is actually very, very low. But I'm not going to assume that everybody here was like assigned a seat by Mr. Tarfa over there. Now, unfortunately, I've used this examples in classes before where it turns out they were sitting in assigned seats and it didn't work. But in this case, I'm pretty sure you guys are not sitting in assigned seats. And so, but the likelihood of you all sitting in these seats is very low, but that doesn't mean it was necessarily designed. So unlikely things can happen all the time, and that does not necessarily reflect design. However, how can we then detect design? Well, let me give you guys an example of this. Let's say that, how many of you guys play poker? Just out of, who's willing to admit they play poker is what I should say. Anybody willing to admit? Okay, one guy, good for you, and the music teacher, all right. So, professor, I should say. So I played poker a couple times in my life. I actually won a $1,000 charity poker tournament years ago. Basically, I got really, really lucky. I'm not a poker player, but I know how to play. So let's say I deal every one of you out a 5-card hand of poker, all right? Now, every one of you is going to get a hand of cards that's going to be very, very unlikely, right? The likelihood of you getting, if you get a very good hand, the likelihood of you getting the exact hand of cards you get is very low. And again, just because something unlikely happens does not mean you're going to therefore say, oh, the deck was stacked, give me this hand of cards. But let's say that now I deal everybody out a hand of cards, and every one of you gets a royal flush. We do this again, and every one of you gets a royal flush. We do this over and over and over again, and every time you all get a royal flush. Well, now you're all going to conclude the deck was stacked. This was not just a random shuffling of cards that gave you each this really good hand of cards. The deck was sort of pre-ordered by some intelligent being to give you each of this very good hand of cards, the best hand of cards you can get in poker. Okay? So that is sort of, something else is going on, more than just unlikelihood, and this is what we call specification. You're now seeing that a pattern is coming forth that shows you that not only is this unlikely, but it also matches a pattern. And so when we find that something is both complex and specified, it matches a pattern, then we detect design. And just to kind of go back to this microorganism analogy, it turns out that this sequence of zeros and ones, it's actually not a random sequence. It's actually, if you're a computer programmer, this will get a little bit nerdy for you here, it's actually binary code that stands for the ASCII characters that encode this sentence in the English language, which says that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So this is actually not just a random sequence of zeros and ones, it's a sequence of zeros and ones that matches a pattern of computer code that outputs a sentence that matches words that you will all recognize from the English language. And now you can all see that this sentence, this code, was in fact designed. Now, interestingly, this quote that we just read is actually from Richard Dawkins. Anybody ever heard of Richard Dawkins here? Who can tell me, who is Richard Dawkins, out of curiosity? Anybody want to tell me who's Dawkins? Yes?
Famous atheist.
Famous atheist and very famous evolutionary biologist. Did you know that he's also one of the world's most accomplished and famous evolutionary biologists? Funny how those two things go together. But in any case, Dawkins, even Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist, he's been called the Pope of Atheism. Even Dawkins admits that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So what we in the intelligent design community say is maybe the reason that things appear designed is because they really were designed. Now Dawkins, of course, does not believe that biology really was designed. He believes that biology is the result of random mutation and natural selection. He doesn't actually think it's really designed. He just says it looks designed, it just really wasn't designed. But we would say that the reason that things look designed is because they really were designed. So, to just give one more example of this idea of specified complexity or complex and specified information, I want to give this silly example here. And I think this maybe will resonate since we're in, we'll get to that in just a minute. So, this is Johan. Johan is from Eastern Europe, and he's going on a tour of mountains of the United States, okay? So first, Johan goes to this mountain, and he says, okay, this mountain, it actually has a very unlikely shape, right? My pointer's not going to work on this, but the likelihood of this mountain having the exact shape it does, you know, with the gully that it has here, and a ridge here, and a ridge here, and here, and the whole shape of the mountain is actually very, very unlikely. So, but is that enough for us to detect design? Well, no. When Johan comes to this mountain, he can see this mountain has a very natural looking shape. As a geologist, you know, I can say, look, this looks like a normally weathered mountain. You can easily explain the shape of this mountain through normal geological processes like wind and erosion and heating and cooling and freezing and thawing, etc. So there's nothing special about this mountain that's going to make us think that it was designed. Since we're in the Dakotas, I'm very happy to present this next slide. You might be able to guess where Joanne is going next. Now it comes to this mountain, right? I've actually never been to Mount Rushmore. Has everybody, if you live in the Dakotas, or pretty much everybody's been to Mount Rushmore? Anybody not been to Mount Rushmore? Am I the only one? Okay, Tanner, you and I, you only know one guy in the back. Okay, we'll have to take a trip together sometime. So this is obviously a mountain that is clearly designed. But why do we say it's designed? All right. Well, what he notices is that not only is the shape of this mountain very, very unlikely, but it matches a specific pattern, namely the faces of 4 famous presidents. Okay. So this mountain shape is both complex and specified. It matches a pattern. So we have a specific pattern plus complexity. Then we can detect design. So if you go to the back, do you guys know this? That if you go to the back side of Mount Rushmore, that's actually So what we just did is we used information to detect design, all right? I think these days we're all very happy to talk about the backsides of presidents. It's been a crazy week. So anyway, we just used information to detect design, and so congratulations, you now understand how to detect design. But the very basic logic here, just to frame it very basically, is that an intelligent design theorist will look at nature and find that there's a certain type of information which always comes from a mind. Okay, mind is always the cause of certain types of information. And then when she goes out into nature and she finds that same type of information in a natural object, she infers that a mind was at work in making that kind of information, and so she detects design. So that's the basics of how we detect design. Okay, so let's now talk about some of the scientific evidence for intelligent design. We're going to go through this really quickly. We'll first start with biochemistry and the evidence for design, and we're going to make a testable prediction here that biology will be full of information-rich structures that contain high levels of complex and specified information. Okay, and I'm going to give you guys 3 examples of where I think that this prediction is fulfilled. The first example is the information in our DNA. If you guys think back to your biology class, how many of you guys have taken biology? Okay, and I know maybe some of you haven't yet, but for those of you who have not, or those of you who need a little refresher, in every cell of your body, except for red blood cells, which originally have DNA, but they get rid of it so they carry more hemoglobin. But every cell normally in your body has a nucleus, and in the nucleus is the DNA, all the DNA that your body needs to build all the proteins that you use, okay? And the DNA molecules are basically very long chains of nucleotide bases that are strung along the backbone of this molecule, and that there's 4 nucleotide bases that are in the DNA. Who can tell me what those nucleotide bases are? Anybody remember from their high school biology class? Yes?
Adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine.
Very good. You get, I assume you already got an A in biology, so very, very nicely done. So if they're represented here, so if you couldn't hear what she said, it's the letters A, C, T, and G stands for the nucleotide bases adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. And they are strung along the backbone of the DNA molecule. And the precise ordering of those nucleotide bases is what determines the sequence of amino acids in your proteins. And if those amino acids in your proteins are not in the right order, then your proteins will not be able to function properly. Proteins are basically very long chains of amino acids that get folded up into a very specific shape and structure so they can perform some important function in your cells. And if you don't have the right ordering of the amino acids in your proteins, then they won't work. You'll have a mutation, you could literally die. And so what determines the ordering of the amino acids is the ordering of the information in these nucleotide bases in the DNA. Now, one of the most interesting discoveries for me as I was studying this topic is to realize that there is no physical or chemical law that dictates the ordering of the nucleotide bases in your DNA, okay? Chemically speaking, no base is preferred over any other. They're all equally preferable. So there's no reason for these nucleotide bases to be in any order according to the laws of chemistry and the laws of physics. So we have to ask the question, how do these nucleotide bases get in the right order to specify all your proteins so that your amino acids can be in the right order in your proteins? So that's an interesting question we can ask. But for now, suffice to say that in your DNA is this language-based digital information in the form of the ordering of the nucleotide bases. And it literally is language-based. The information in your DNA is encoded in a biochemical language called the genetic code, which your cells are capable of reading. We'll get to that in just a moment here, but for now, just suffice to say that your cells are rich, and your DNA is rich in complex and specified information. You have a very unlikely ordering of the nucleotide bases in your DNA, which matches the exact pattern that is needed to build the proteins that your body needs to function properly, okay? So again, this information in your DNA, it's written in a biochemical language. We call this language the genetic code. Now, let's think about how do we process codes in human technology. Well, I like to use the example of a DVD to explain this concept. If you just have a DVD, it's basically useless, right? You can't do anything with it. Well, okay, when I was in college, do you guys remember those old AOL DVD CDs? You would get to install AOL on your computer. They used to give those away when I was in college, and my buddies and I in the dorm, we would take them and we would throw them into the eucalyptus bark of the eucalyptus tree, and we use them as frisbees, okay? So anyway, you can do something with a DVD if that's all you have. But normally, in order to get the information off of a DVD, what do you need? You need a machine to read the information on the DVD. You need a DVD player. Otherwise, that information is just going to sit on the DVD and it's not going to do anything for you. By the way, kids, you guys do know what DVDs are, right? Remember DVDs? Kids, you guys know what a DVD? Okay, all right, good. We're not that outdated yet. I mean, I know that nobody watches TV. Anybody still watch DVDs every once in a while? You know, the internet goes down at home, right? You're like, what are we going to do? We'll bust out those old DVDs and watch a DVD. I've done that before. So, okay, so in order to get information off of a DVD, you need a machine. You need a DVD player to read the information, and now you can finally get the useful output, and the information off the DVD is doing something for you. Well, in a very similar way, the information in DNA by itself is useless. You've got all this information in every one of your cells in your body with the information in your DNA, but by itself, the DNA molecule is just going to sit there. You can't just use the information in the DNA. And much like a DVD, your body uses machines, molecular machines, to be able to read the information in the DNA and then convert it to some kind of a useful output, okay? So these two machines here, one of them is called RNA polymerase, and the other is called the ribosome. And these are molecular machines in every one of your cells that helps to read the information in the DNA and then convert it to some kind of a useful output, whether we're talking about proteins or molecular machines or tissues or whole organ systems in your body. So your body literally uses machines to read the information in the DNA. And much like a computer, that information in your DNA is written in a language, and the machines in your cells are capable of interpreting the biochemical commands and codes. Much like a computer language has commands and codes, they can read the commands and codes in your DNA, interpret them, execute those commands, and then give you some kind of a useful output. Because of this computer-like nature of the information in our DNA, even computer experts have recognized the similarity between DNA and computer codes. Bill Gates, we're a fan of Bill Gates in Seattle where I live, this is not an actual blue screen of death, but Bill Gates says that DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any we've ever created. Even Richard Dawkins says that the machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal, okay? So this is really interesting. Even Dawkins recognizes that what we see in our DNA is like a machine code that we would find in computers, okay? So this again is showing where in our experience does computer-like code, instructions, commands, where do these things come from? In our experience, they have only one known cause, and that is intelligence. But then what is the output? You know, what is the output of this process of reading information and doing this information processing in your cells? Well, the product of the information processing is your cells are using this information to build proteins, and then those proteins assemble into what are called molecular machines. Your cells are literally full of molecular machines that are running around performing all kinds of vital functions. If you don't believe me, here's a quote from a former president of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Bruce Alberts. He says, "The entire cell can be viewed as a factory that contains an elaborate network of interlocking assembly lines, each of which is composed of a set of large protein machines. Why do we call the large protein assemblies that underlie cell function protein machines? Precisely because, like macroscopic machines, like machines invented by humans to deal efficiently with the macroscopic world, these protein assemblies contain highly coordinated moving parts. what he's saying is that our cells, this is from one of the most prestigious scientists in the country, and he's saying that our cells are full of protein-based molecular machines. So living cells are full of molecular machines and encoded information. Now it turns out that not only, of course, where in our experience do machine-like structures come from, right? In our experience, they only come from intelligence. So again, we're getting a clue as to where these things come from. But it turns out that these molecular machines also pose a challenge to Darwin's gradual theory of evolution. You see, according to Darwin, everything in life has to evolve one small little mutational step at a time. You have to evolve everything one little step at a time through one little mutation at a time. And because of this, Darwin said in Origin of Species, he said, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, then my theory would absolutely break down. And again, what Darwin is saying is that his theory only works when you can evolve structures one small little mutational step at a time through numerous successive slight modifications. And if you can't do that, if you need, say, lots of complexity to be there all at once before it works, then his theory doesn't work to explain it. So we can ask the question, are there structures in biology that meet Darwin's challenge? Darwin didn't know of any in his day. However, Darwin didn't know very much about the cell. In Darwin's day, we knew very, very little about the cell. And today, biochemist Michael Behe, who studies the molecular machines in our cells, he has come up with this idea called irreducible complexity. And basically what irreducible complexity says is that there are many features of nature in biology which require a certain core number of parts to be present or they won't work. And if you remove any one of those parts, then it won't perform its function and it won't actually provide any, say, selective advantage that helps that organism to survive and reproduce. So according to irreducible complexity, you can't remove the complexity because if it was any less complex, if you reduce the complexity, it stops working. So therefore, you can't build these structures up one little mutational step at a time. Either all the necessary parts are there all at once, and it functions and gives you some assistance in surviving and reproducing, which is what evolution requires, or you don't have all the parts present, and it's not going to do anything for you, and there's no reason for evolution to build the structure, okay? And according to Michael Behe, there are many molecular machines in biology that are irreducibly complex. I'm going to talk about one very famous one today. Anybody tell me, what is this molecular machine, for those of you who are familiar with intelligent design? Yes? Flagellum, yes, the bacterial flagellum, very good. So what is the bacterial flagellum, for those of you who maybe haven't heard of it? The bacterial flagellum is a molecular machine, like an outboard motor. It goes on the back of bacteria, spins around, and allows them to find food in some kind of a liquid medium. And so some engine specs on the flagellum. It's a self-assembled and repaired water-cooled rotary engine. It's driven by the flow of protons, although the exact mechanism is not fully understood. It can spin in 2 gears, forward and reverse. It can change directions in a quarter of a turn. This becomes very impressive when you realize that it operates at about 18,000 revolutions per minute, but they've been clocked up to 100,000 RPM. And there's about 50 genes that produce over 30 structural parts, okay? Some have even predicted that it might be up to 100% energetically efficient. So this is far more efficient than any other machine created by human beings. So there have been experiments done on the flagellum which show that it needs about 30 to 35 genes to be present in order for it to be able to function. What this means is that it is by definition irreducibly complex. It requires a certain core set of parts to be present, or you're not going to get any function that allows the bacteria to be able to swim around and find food, okay? So this is by definition irreducibly complex. It poses a serious challenge to Darwin's theory, okay? So, talking about this prediction of intelligent design, that life would be full of information-rich structures. We've seen encoded information in our DNA, high CSI in our DNA. We've seen the information processing ability of the cell, and the product of that information processing is protein-based machines. But where in our experience do these things come from? Language-based code, like what we see in our DNA, computer-like information processing, and machine-like structures. Where do these sorts of things come from? In all of our experience, these have only one known cause, and that is intelligence. So I think we have a very compelling argument for intelligent design here. Now what's interesting is biologists, even evolutionary scientists have recognized this evidence for design. This is a quote from Francis Crick, who was co-awarded the Nobel Prize for co-discovering the structure of DNA. And Crick says that biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. It's like he has to keep reminding himself that this was designed, it didn't actually evolve, because his intuition, what he sees with his eyes, his observations of life and of biology, tell him that it looks like it was designed and it did not evolve. Yet, nonetheless, Crick was a very committed atheist and materialist who did not believe in intelligent design. Of course, we already saw this quote from Dawkins. Even Dawkins admits that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So I would argue that ID's prediction has been confirmed, and ID has found all kinds of information in biology. Mr. Tarfa, how are we doing on time? Because it's been close to 40 minutes here, and I've got a few more slides, and we could just call it, and we can go into Q&A, or what do you think we should do here?
No, you could go ahead if you wanted to go through those slides, and then people can start thinking of their questions. And
Okay. I'll go for maybe about 5 or 6 more minutes.
Okay.
That's cool.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, so let's change topics now, and we're going to talk about the fossil record and paleontology, and whether or not we can see evidence for design in the history of life through the fossil record. And again, we're going to make a prediction here, which is that new forms of life are going to appear suddenly in the fossil record without similar evolutionary precursors, and this is going to represent sort of mass infusion of new information into the biosphere, into the world, to allow these new forms of life to come into existence. Well, when we look at the fossil record, what we see is a pattern of what we call explosions, where new forms of life appear abruptly, without direct evolutionary precursors, and this directly confirms this prediction. How many of you have heard of what is called the Cambrian explosion? Have you guys heard of this? Okay, so the Cambrian explosion is an event that took place in the fossil record, where basically we see that most of the major groups of animals, they're called the animal phyla, appear abruptly in the fossil record without direct evolutionary precursors. And in this diagram, what we see is the major animal phyla, things like mollusks, arthropods, vertebrates, echinoderms, etc., that they all appear, or almost all of them appear, in the Cambrian period. And in this diagram, it's kind of hard, I don't know if you guys can see this clearly, but can you see there are these thick black lines here, okay? And then below them there are these thick black lines. In this diagram, the thick black lines represent the periods of the fossil record for which we have actual fossils documenting these major animal groups. The thin black lines represent sort of their early evolutionary history, where they're supposedly evolving from a common ancestor, okay? And as you can see in this diagram, all of the connections between these animal groups, these animal phyla, which are supposed to show how they evolved from a common ancestor, all the connecting lines, they're all thin black lines, right? The thick black lines show that these various types of animals, most of them appear abruptly in the Cambrian period, and then they just continue on. So really what this shows is the exact opposite of what evolutionary theory should predict. We're finding the abrupt appearance of the major animal groups, and then they continue on and they appear without any clear direct evolutionary precursors. Now you might say, isn't there a thick black line connecting the fish on the far right to something else? Well, this paper was published in 1998, and the following year, they actually discovered fossil fish in the Cambrian explosion. So if we were to redraw this diagram now, going with more accurate, up-to-date data, we would actually draw the lines for the vertebrates going all the way back to here, where the other major animal groups typically begin. And they would also be appearing in the Cambrian explosion. So this is a quote from an invertebrate biology, zoology textbook. It says, most of the animal phyla that are represented in the fossil record first appeared fully formed in the Cambrian. The fossil record is therefore of no help with respect to the origin and early diversification of the various animal phyla. I would say it's no help if you're an evolutionist, but if you're willing to think outside the evolutionary box and say, well, what if an intelligent agent? What do intelligent agents do? They produce large amounts of information. And what if an intelligent agent rapidly infused large amounts of information into the natural world so that these new forms of life could come into existence? Well, this is exactly what we would expect to find large numbers of forms of life appearing abruptly without clear and direct evolutionary precursors. And in fact, there are many other examples of explosions of life forms in the fossil record. I won't go through all of them right now, but a few other examples. There's an explosion of marine Mesozoic reptiles. There's an explosion of flowering plants. There's a bird explosion. There's even an explosion of various mammal orders in the fossil record. And so, for this reason, we see quotes like this, that many species remain virtually unchanged for millions of years, then suddenly disappear to be replaced by a quite different or related form. Moreover, most major groups of animals appear abruptly in the fossil record, fully formed with no fossils that yet discovered the form of transition from their parent group. So I would say that again, ID's prediction has been confirmed. So, Mr. Tarfa, I think we're now at a little over 40 minutes, so maybe it's just a good time to call it. What do you think? Okay, so thank you guys very much, and I guess we'll now take some questions. So.